Hi guys! So now that you have viewed the short video, Asians in the Library, let's discuss from a rhetorical perspective what you may have noticed while you watched. To recap, in Alexandra Wallace's video, you should have been looking for the use of the rhetorical devices we've been discussing in this module so far, such as ethos, pathos, and logos. By analyzing a persuasive text through the lens of these three rhetorical devices, you can be sure that your analysis of the text will remain objective versus subjective based on your personal feelings about it. As you watched, you should have been paying attention also to things like the speaker's tone and style, which can give us some idea of who the author's intended audience is and what the author's purpose may have been. Let's look at ethos first. As Aristotle said, ethos is the most important of the three rhetorical appeals. This is because without credibility, emotional and logical appeals really won't carry as much weight or be as effective. In other words, if you don't believe that someone who's speaking to you is trustworthy or credible, then their use of emotional or logical information or appeals will not matter to you. They will not really persuade you. Now, before we watched this video, we didn't know Alexandra Wallace from a stranger on the street. She isn't a celebrity. She isn't Oprah. She's just a regular college student. So how do we determine if she's credible or not, if there's no information about her? It turns out much of the time when we read and analyze arguments, conducting a quick Google search is not going to tell us whether or not the arguer is credible, especially if the argument is coming from, let's say, a YouTube video, which is not always from a channel that has multiple videos where someone has established a sense of some kind of reputation or personality. If the argument is also coming from a local newspaper article or a letter to an editor, it may be difficult to determine the author's credibility from looking them up. This is because maybe the author has never published anything before or does not have much of an online presence. That's okay. Much of an author's credibility actually comes from the things they say or don't say or do within the text. In Alexandra's case, she does tell us that she is a current student at UCLA. So she is speaking from personal experience in her argument. Having experienced something personally can give someone credibility when they speak about something. However, right away, Wallace also communicates to us that she is not credible by stating, "I may not be the most politically correct person, ... Another thing we may notice about her is the way she is dressed. Personal dress is not always a rhetorical foul, but in the case of a video or in-person argument, some viewers or listeners may feel that a person's presentation of themselves does impact the power of their words. Alexandra's way of presenting herself in a revealing outfit shows a lack of professionalism and contributes to an overall sense a viewer may have that this person is not to be trusted. Ultimately, very early in the video, it is clear that Alexandra lacks credibility as a good student because of her tone and her dress. She also argues without logos. She goes on in the video to state biased opinions about students. She shows no empathy for different cultures. Thus, she receives no empathy back from her audience. She loses credibility in this way because rather than making a valid argument with evidence and a purpose, her video comes across as a rant. Another important element that is hard to identify in Wallace's argument is a clue about who her audience is. She does not specifically address anyone or indicate through tone or language who her targeted listener is. And because her video also lacks a thesis, its purpose is unclear. As we discussed in a prior lesson, without a clear purpose and clear audience, an argument cannot succeed. Finally, Alexandra lacks organization. She does not give examples of why cell phones in the library are bad. Instead, She goes on a tangent about Asian students. After explaining her problem, she proposes no solution. She merely complains about it for 2 minutes. To her credit, she does use some exemplification, some description, and some narration, but because her argument lacks credibility and logic, audience and purpose, these strategies are really not enough to make the argument effective. If you were to write a rhetorical analysis of Wallace's video, you would ultimately explain that her lack of attention to effective rhetorical reasoning led to her argument being offensive and received negatively by almost everyone. Her video is an example of what not to do when attempting to make a legitimate, persuasive argument utilizing Aristotle's rhetorical triangle.